Welcome to Small Town Tales, a podcast where we hear stories of the paranormal, haunting legends, and all things spirit. Join us as we explore the unknown. Now, here's your host, C.L. Thomas.
Hi, this is C.L. Thomas, and you're listening to another episode of Small Town Tales podcast. Tonight's guest is author and paranormal researcher Gare Allen to discuss the police force and first responders' experiences with the paranormal. Gare Allen is author of 13 books, including the Amazon bestseller, The Dead, A Paranormal Story. Gare attended the Metaphysical Academy in Tampa, Florida during the mid-1990s, which later inspired his series of short stories, 7 Lessons. The collection chronicles otherworldly experiences with reincarnation, astral projection, channeling, and divination. And this should be a great episode because there's a storm brewing behind Gare. I can hear the thunder rolling. Gare, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me on. Yeah, here in Tampa, Florida, this is our 4:00 afternoon thunderstorms, which is law in the summer that we have to have. So good stuff.
I think that's all up and down the Gulf Coast too. It's like that in New Orleans and Orange Beach and all those places. It's like clockwork on your clock.
Yeah, if you look at the radar, it's just a big band or a big line of storms, and they just move across. And yeah, we know it's 4:00. That's how we plan our day.
I do miss that part of the world, though. That's for sure.
Are you from Florida originally, or from this side?
No, I'm from Nashville. So, originally from Pittsburgh, moved to Nashville, lived there for 15 years, and I lived in New Orleans for probably about a year, and been back and forth between all of those locations in the South because of photography and my work back then. So it was like constant traveling through the South.
I love Nashville. Absolutely love that city.
I do too. I'd still live there, but I had a tornado that just pretty much destroyed my life about 2 years ago. So I moved to Vegas.
Oh no.
Yep. That's a story for another time.
All right.
Let's start with you telling us how you got into the paranormal field as a writer.
So I had a paranormal experience when I was a child. When I was 12 years old, I went to bed and I had my bedroom was at the top of the stairs, and I'd gone to bed and I had the family dog at the foot of the bed, and I'd only been laying there a moment when suddenly my bed levitated itself, and it only went up probably a couple inches, and then it fell right back down and made a loud thud. And I was frozen, and my dog jumped off the bed. You know, my limbs had moved, kind of giving me, you know, confirmation that something had happened, and I hadn't imagined it or dreamed it. And just then my older brother had come up, and he peeked in the door and he asked me what that noise was, again, giving me confirmation that something had happened, and I didn't have a TV on or a radio on or anything like that. And I didn't respond. I was probably white with terror, and he left. And I never understood what had happened, but it was real, and I couldn't explain it. And I shared it with my family, but they were very grounded and are very grounded individuals. And so middle child, I think, was just sort of one of those, okay, Gare, go to sleep now. And then, you know, didn't have a whole lot happen. And then in my mid-20s, I was driving and I happened to look over in a plaza, a little strip plaza, and there was a metaphysical bookstore, and it had an academy attached to it where they taught workshops. And don't ask me why to this day, but something made me turn in there. My guides or my intuition or something told me to turn in, and I did. And that just started a journey of studying metaphysics, experiences with the paranormal that just continued until today, which I'm 53 now. And as I gained these experiences and shared them with people, and they would say, oh, I had something happen too. What do you think that means? And again, not that I'm any kind of expert, but I thought to write them down and sort of present them to people as, hey, here's what happened to me. And through my studies, this is what I understand this to be, and maybe give you some insight, because some people are just confused. Others, it's pretty traumatic because it kind of goes against a belief system, or they don't feel safe that there's something that they can't explain. So I kind of wanted to write a Metaphysics 101 book. And that's where the 7 Lessons series came from. There's 7 books in the series, and they all focus on something different. And they all have 7 in the title. So 7 Regressions focuses on reincarnation. 7 Abductions talks about aliens. 7 Projections is astral projections. 7 Predictions focuses on divination. I kind of wanted to get the whole gamut, of metaphysics. Right. And that's where that came from. And after I wrote it, it was a fictional series based on my experiences. And they said, did those things really happen to you? And I said, let me write a book now that actually is everything that has happened to me in chronological order from the time my bed levitated at 12 years old until today, which at the time I was 44 when I wrote The Dead. And that's where The Dead came from. And that was just poured out of me. Here's everything that's happened. I'm not saying it's real. I'm not saying it's anything. I'm just telling you what I went, what I experienced, and how I've come to understand what it means in my life.
It's real to you, right? It doesn't matter.
It's real to me. And there were times where, I was like, oh, it's a ghost. And then I was like, oh, it wasn't a ghost. And, so I'm a left brain guy. It's like, if something is debunked, it's debunked. It doesn't have to be paranormal or metaphysical, but it's funny when you open yourself up to it, how prevalent the experiences are. It's crazy. But I welcome them at the same time. They don't scare me. I've been scared. I've had terrifying experiences, but it's no different than, going in maybe, a bad part of town or putting yourself in a dangerous situation in the real world. Those things exist here too. And I'd rather be aware that they exist so that I could avoid them or just be prepared to handle them when they happen.
So this whole thing started when you were 12. Do you think that, I don't know, I would be terrified if my bed levitated off the ground. Do you think this was a negative entity? Do you think it was just spirit trying to get your attention? What do you think that was?
I think it was definitely negativity. And I'm not sure, when negativity builds up in a home, and again, this is through my experience and through talking to other people. And, there are times when you have a home environment that isn't that is hospitable to negativity. We'll put it that way. And I think, there's something to that poltergeist thought process where you have negativity and it builds and builds and you don't release it in a healthy way and it forms something negative, or you just open the door to other negative entities to come in and flourish and live in that environment and then, do things. And I think, I'm not sure which way that experience was for me, but it was definitely, I had a lot of crazy dreams. So, the negativity was there. I don't know if it was like I said, an outside negative experience or something I was building up. Again, I was middle child, and I had some struggles as a young kid. And I struggled trying to find, where I fit, because I wasn't really, a jock, and I wasn't really super smart, and I didn't really fit in any category. And, God, I love that I didn't now, but at the time as a child, that's not celebrated when you're, 12 years old. Sorry, it just wasn't. And hopefully it is today, but it wasn't back then. I was a very emotional child too. So there was that. Again, middle child syndrome. I was kind of your classic poster child for that. So, yeah, I mean, in hindsight, I think it was just an environment for some negativity, at least with me, and some of the things I was struggling with.
Another fascinating work that you did was your 7-book lesson series about past lives, regressions, alien abductions, and out-of-body experiences. Are all of these experiences something that you have experienced personally, like the alien abduction?
So the alien abduction, I had one weird experience. I wouldn't say I remember the abduction. I remember circumstances surrounding it. But again, I'll go back. I've always been a vivid dreamer. And when I started to really focus and study metaphysics, I aligned my chakras. I stopped drinking sodas. I was meditating every single night. I was keeping myself focused and open so that when I was extra sensitive. I wasn't saying I was psychic, but I definitely would have prophetic dreams. I opened myself up to those things, and it seemed to happen more when I was sleeping, but I did have things happen in the waking state. But I actively pursued astral projections, and I had conscious experiences of those happening. And of course, I brought back memories after I had fallen asleep of that. I heavily focused on regressing into past lives, brought back a lot of crazy memories of those and chronicled those. So yeah, a lot of it, I really wanted to experience those things, connecting with my spirit guide. I made an effort to do that, and I made, audible a connection one day, and I didn't tell anybody about it. And I called a friend of mine who was a psychic that worked at the academy, and he answered the phone by saying, "I heard you made contact with your guide today," which just gave me
that just gave me chills.
It was just perfect, because I think the folks working on the other side of me, they know I need that confirmation, because even though it happened and I could feel the breath in my ear from the whisper from them, I still needed that extra thing. I'm in physical reality. I need proof, right? It's dense here. We need to, believe what's happening here. You got to see it to believe it and touch it and all that good stuff. But the alien abduction was interesting because I'll tell you the experience I had, and it terrified me, and it was more the unknowing part. So what happened was I'd gotten home late and I felt like I was being watched. And I'm not a paranoid guy. I really don't have those feelings. I never feel really unsafe or anything with other people or burglars or anything like that. But that night I just was agitated and I said, something's up. And I got undressed. I got under the covers. I went to bed and I woke up in the middle of the night, startled, like you ever have those dreams where you fall and you wake up and you feel like you just fell? That was how I woke up. But I woke up, I was fully clothed, and I was laying on top of the covers, perpendicular to where I would have been sleeping on the bed.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And I had this incredible feeling that I had been placed there from that drop. And of course, had to be aliens, right? So that's where my mind went. So, I didn't have anything. I had a psychic ask me about it. They said, do you have any recollection of an abduction? And I said, of an abduction, no, because I had this other experience, but I didn't share it. And they said, so you've blocked it out. And I didn't say anything about it happening, but I did have a psychic pick up on it one time, and they were very on with a lot of other things in the reading. But I don't really feel a connection to that after that, and I'm glad. That's really not something I'm good not dealing with that. I don't know if you are, but I'm good with that. Staying away from that side of things.
Right. Well, the thing of it is, there's so many stories. It's kind of like Bigfoot, right? There's so many sightings and experiences, and even the government's now coming out saying that they've seen, or they're admitting that they've seen different on otherworldly alien activity. So who's to say that we're not actually part of them and they're trying to connect with us in some way spiritually?
Yeah, there's so many thought processes on it. And at the end of the day, for me, and I wrote an article about this for a website called the Ghost Diaries. And my thought process was, I hope they never present themselves, because I believe they have presented themselves. They're probably working with governments or secret societies. That's happening, I'm pretty sure. But if an alien were to land tomorrow, nothing good is going to come of it, because where are they going to, the country they land in will think that they're siding with that country. And now it's going to, it's like, well, where do they go? There is, take me to your leader. There is no leader of Earth. I apologize. We don't have one. We're all bickering and fighting with each other right now. Come back in 100 years, maybe, when we can get along. So I just, and the different belief systems they would have, and of course that wouldn't jive with our religious, political. Then all we'd want is the technology. We all want a ray gun at that point. I mean, we're not ready for that, but I do believe that there is a deeper involvement. And I don't think we have any control. And I say us, meaning the Gen Pop. I think we're all going to figure out or find out what the deal is with that. But and then that's one. There's so many species of aliens, and that's what's believed. So some of them are nice, and so I think I read that like 9 of them are on our side. 2 of them don't care. They can go either way. And 1 or 2 have pretty bad plans for us. And it's like, so, but if they've learned anything, it's like from our movies, we'll blow the planet up before we give it over. So they're probably wondering what to do at this point.
Isn't that what happened to Mars, or so they think?
Yeah, exactly. They were like, "Nope, you can't have it. If you can't have it, if we can't have it, nobody can have it." And it's like, talk about tantruming children, but that's kind of how we would handle that, unfortunately. And I hate to make talk so bad about us as a race, but it's like that's where we are right now, unfortunately.
I know it's such an off-topic subject, and it's not really police force related in the paranormal. But since we're on the topic, do you think there's a connection, or what are your thoughts on the Enoch? Have you heard of the actual Enoch stories, and how I think it's like a third of the angels came to heaven and mated with human females, and the races got mixed, and they believe that there's alien presence actually, or were actually from the aliens. I forget how the story actually goes, but it's from the Book of Enoch. That if you watch the series Agent Aliens, they talk a lot about this. Yeah,
and there's a lot of those theories out there that at some point, they sped up our evolution, by inserting certain DNA and chromosomes and different things like that, and they traced it back. So I am familiar with what you're talking about. I didn't realize I've heard that term, but I didn't connect it with it. But yeah, and and that's great. But they're also able to put in chromosomes or not allow chromosomes to be there that would allow certain things. And my understanding is that it's a form of control. So we develop to a certain point. And so the whole thought process and metaphysically is that we're ascending to fourth dimension. The world's about to shift, and those who at that higher vibration and understanding will shift with it, and those that are at the lower density will stay back. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the thought process there. And it's like, okay, so as much as I can, elevate my thought process and my vibration and being positive and all that good stuff, I am. But the DNA only allows, just like our physical body only allows certain things. I can't fly, but I can run, kind of thing. So at this point in our evolution, this is where we are. But yeah, you kind of feel like, bioengineered, new animal, and that kind of thing. And it's like, oh, well, yeah, we really are an experiment, big petri dish here, on Earth. But
what's interesting about that too is there's a scientist who actually studied human genes and was able to trace back. I think he did it thousands and thousands and thousands of years. But our gene pool has changed drastically within the last, they said 5,000 years, whereas prior to that, it was pretty much stagnant. So something happened. Yeah. In that time period, and we just continue to evolve. It's just really
and it's funny because then you have the other side of it, the technological advancement. 50 years ago, 60 years ago, whatever. Suddenly, boom! Now there's computers, and our technology has surpassed our spiritual and intellectual growth, and which is historically never a good thing. And Atlantis is always cited as that's exactly what happened. They failed because their technological advancement, went beyond their intelligence, their emotional understanding of things, and they destroyed themselves. And here we are, and it's like, it's just crazy. You can be homeless and have a phone still, and it's like everybody has a phone, and I keep looking to the phones because it's almost like they're ensuring everybody has a phone. And I'm like, what is up with the phone? Why do we, and I think I remember reading that, they send things through the TV, wavelengths and to control us or stunt things. And, it's like, well, not everybody's watching TV, or they are, but they're streaming it on their phone. Right.
Right.
And so I think that's, so every time I pick up my phone, I'm like, I'm giving you control, guys. It's like, I'm sorry. You got me. I need this phone. You got us. So I don't know. I'm sure there's a whole nother thought process there, with the controlling us through our phones, but it just seems like it's super important that we all have one. There's got to be something to that.
There's got to be, especially with all the, was it 4G that came out on the phones recently that everybody was in uproar over. I really don't understand the back end of what actually that was and why that was such a thing for people.
It's at the point now where, and I said I was joking, I'm 53 now, and I'm like, okay, the world is officially starting to pass me by. I'm just accepting things now, rather than I'm not wearing the latest clothes. I'm not, I have an iPhone 11. I think that's not just a couple back from what's out. I don't know, but I'm just like, I don't know what's happening out there. I know just enough to get by now.
Yeah, I'm in my 40s. I think that starts when you're 40. For me, it was just like, I don't even know what's going on anymore.
I think it was late 40s. I was like, and I give in. At this point, I'm just going to ride this. I'm going to stick with the metaphysical, paranormal stuff. I don't know. I'll have a phone. I remember someone asked me, which phone do you have? And I said, I honestly had to look. And if I hadn't turned it over and seen the Apple, I wouldn't have known. And I was like, oh, it's an Apple. And they're like, okay. And I'm like, I think at the time it was a 7. And they just rolled their eyes. I'm like, okay, apparently that's horrible. So I had to go get a new phone.
Apparently you're just not cool. So back to the discussion, paranormal activity isn't limited to missing household items or anything like that. I want to talk about your Ghost Crime series. It's a 2-book series. So it discusses, I think it's a fiction, right? And it discusses a detective who's having all of these paranormal experiences.
what happened was I'd written several books, but I kind of put a compilation book together, and I had an idea of putting together another compilation book where it was, here's what happened to these first responders. And each chapter would focus on, maybe one would be firefighters, one would be nurses, but it would focus on all the folks that are in the healthcare industry, all the people that help us every day. And I really wanted to kind of honor them and say, hey, this is what they go through. So I put a message out on my website, and I got a lot of responses back, a lot of DMs. Hey, this happened to me. Some of them were quick stories, and some were pretty elaborate and involved. And I was like, wow. So anyway, I got into contact with this one who was a retired detective now. And he's like, look, this is what happened. But he was not happy that it happened. He did not want, and none of these people wanted to give me their name. He didn't want any notoriety. He didn't want anything other than to say, let me just share with you what happened. And he wished it didn't happen. And I thought, wow. And he was sort of your classic, overweight detective, lived alone, had gone through trauma early on, never recovered from it. Because back in his day, those things weren't discussed. You just did your job and you went home. But,
Right.
Ate fast food every day. It was just really a terrible existence. But he was absolutely dedicated to helping people at the same time. And unfortunately, a lot of his cases, or many of his cases, had small children that didn't fare well. And that really just, murdered him. And I thought, well, I can do this guy justice in a way. And I don't know if he'll ever read the book. I'm not in contact with him anymore. But if I can put him in a situation, I can tell what happened to him, but heal him within the books as well, and kind of put him on that journey. And so that was my idea. So that's what I did. So the first book is actually broken up into 6 cases, and the cases are based on stories I received from both him, things that happened to me, and then 1 or 2 other stories that were shared to me from other first responders or nurses and healthcare folks. And that's where that book came from. So the stories, the events that happened are based on the stories given to me, but I had to weave them into a fictional narrative because I had to put the detective in there. I had to give him support people, and put him in. Of course, it all had to tie in and make sense at the end of the day as well. So that's what I did with the first one. The second one, he's starting to turn a corner into healing, but I still wanted to. So I had a narrative going from the first book, but I wanted to get all these other like little one-off stories that were shared with me, and so I created a sort of an AA, but for the folks that are in healthcare and first responders, to share in a group setting. That they went through something traumatic or just something they didn't understand or something that, went against their belief system, but they could share it with someone who wouldn't laugh at them, who had gone through their own paranormal experience. And maybe even, just talking about it sometimes helps immensely. But maybe getting some feedback. And I put the detective in the group unwillingly to kind of provide his feedback. He's not an expert, but everybody sees him as one because they're aware of what he went through in the first book, kind of thing. Right. But I'm not going to say it was a clever way. It was my way of getting all those extra stories in there without them having to really tie into the rest of the story.
Yeah, I think it is clever. The whole project is clever because we're talking about, it's kind of like the medical field, right? Where there's a physician right now that's pretty prominent in the paranormal world. His name is Haunted MD. I don't know if you've seen any of his stuff or not. He's an emergency physician, from my understanding, and he's just really out there. He'll tell everything about his paranormal experiences. But it seems like first responders, medical, police officers, firefighters, anybody that's out there in that kind of life, they're more resistant to talk about anything paranormal.
Yeah, and again, it's when I spoke to, I meet somebody or a friend of mine, his wife was a nurse, and I'd say, hey, did you have anything happen? And they're like, yeah, I had a few things happen, but you can tell they're like already like, don't ask me. I don't, and so you read the room, right? You're like, okay. And you try to interview somebody and you're like, okay, they're not into that. And it's like, man, but, through a DM or through email, or through the website, I could get that response. And what was great was, once I got one, they say, oh, and this happened to, and my friend had this happen to them. And of course, everybody's saying, well, it doesn't mean it's true. And I said, no, it doesn't mean that it's 100% true that they shared it, but they have nothing to gain by sharing these stories because there's no names attached. Nobody's getting anything for it. So, my thought is, they took the outlet to share it when nobody else even asked the question, but they probably didn't want to share it. And, you don't want to be that guy or that girl that, is everything's a ghost. And,
Right.
And I get it. I'll give you a great example. I had again, 53. I had a colonoscopy earlier this year, and I came out of it. And as I came out of it, there was this beautiful nurse standing next to me. And she's like waking me up, and she's like, Garrett's time to get up. And I look over at her, and she's smiling. And there's another nurse at the end of the bed, and she's kind of typing stuff into the laptop, whatever. And she's like, how you feeling? And I said, I feel good. And she's like, all right, well, nurse. And I think she said Jessica. I forget her name, but we'll go with Jessica. And Nurse Jessica is going to take it from here. And she walked away. And Nurse Jessica on cue walked over as she walked away. And she said, how you doing? And I said, good. I said, she was really nice. And she's like, who? I said, the nurse that was there. She's like, there's no other nurse here. And I'm like, oh, come on. I'm like, so no one's going to believe me that I saw. Of course, I tell everybody I saw a ghost. Like, of course you did. I'm like, no, I swear to you that happened. Now, was I coming out of, being under, and there's other stuff, but talk about an interactive hallucination. Good Lord. I was like, it wasn't like I just saw him. I mean, there was this whole thing, and it was choreographed and everything. So that happens. But
So what can you talk about some of these police experiences that you know?
Yeah, sure. So God, there's so many that have been shared, and I'm writing book 3 now, so I'm going to put more into book 3 as well. I haven't really reached out to get more stories because I had enough to kind of get me through at least through the 3rd book, and I'm not sure how far the series is going to go, but one of my favorites is a nurse who there was a terrible accident on the 50-60 car pileup, and the hospital was just flooded with people that were injured. But there were two men that were put in the same room, and they were being treated, but they were not expected to make it. And so she went into the room to check on them, and she went to the bed closest to the door, and it was freezing in the room. And so she walked over. She thought something was wrong with the air, but she went over to the man, and he was just terrified. And she understood, he's not doing well. He's not expected to make it. And she's trying to calm him down, and he keeps pointing at the ceiling. And he's like, it's trying to get me. And she's like, what's trying to get you? And he's like, there's a demon, and he's going to take me to hell because I'm a bad man. And he convinced himself he was going to hell. And she calmed him down. So then she goes to the other side of the room, and it's much warmer. And she's like, whoa, that's strange because it's all one unit, but okay. So she's just super busy. So this man looks very peaceful. Again, he's not expected to make it either. And he's got a cross around his neck. And she said, how are you doing? And he's just smiling, looking up. And he's like, I'm fine. And she's like, what are you looking at? And he's like, there's an angel here for me. And she's like, okay, this is crazy. So both men pass away, unfortunately. She said a couple months went by, and she goes to check in on a patient who's in that room. And it's an elderly woman, and she's sitting in the bed closest to the door. So she walks in again, and she didn't notice it, but it was cold again. And she's like, okay, this is strange. It kind of took her back to that night a little bit. And she's like, but she had called the nurse to the room. And she said, can I help you? And she's like, yeah, I'm not in the right place. And she's like, no, you're supposed to be in this room. And she goes, no, I'm supposed to be in this room, but I'm supposed to be in that bed with the angel. And she points to the other bed on the other side of the room.
Oh, my goodness.
And yeah, I'm getting chills now because it was like crazy. So it took her back to that night, of what the men had told her she had seen. And, she thought people see what they want to see when they know they're passing, especially in a traumatic, experience that those gentlemen had been in with the car accident. But this woman was very calm. She was just elderly, but she was definitely, heading towards that late in life. So
what's interesting about that is the man who saw the demonic entity, it was cold. That's kind of strange.
Yeah. And
the opposite.
In some experiences, well, I think for a demon or something negative, they have to pull the energy out of the room. And so they pull the light, they pull the energy, and it sort of like, drops the temperature. I know paranormal investigators will say that the batteries will drain, their phones will drain, that kind of thing. Right. And then the temperature drops in the room, kind of thing. But I know alternately, I had a friend of mine, the psychic actually from the Metaphysical Academy. His name was Dane. He unconsciously channeled his spirit guide, which was crazy. I mean, he literally went into a trance. This woman came through this guy, and it was the most amazing experience I've ever seen. I got to see it several times. But I remember he turned down the air conditioner before he did it. And I said, what are you doing that for? He goes, it's going to get hot. And because the energy coming out, the positivity, the light that room, I was sweating. It just like zoom, brought the room right up. I was like, wow. So I always associate warmth, with the light, and then cold with the darkness, so to speak.
That's pretty interesting. There's a lady I know that works with angels, and it's the same thing. She channels Archangel Michael and just different angel entities, and the room will get kind of warm too. And if you've ever been in like healing energy ceremonies, it's the same thing. It gets really
and yeah, absolutely. And then, just doing, your chakra work at night, you're, aligning yourself, meditating, it's like you don't have the bed sheets on. I mean, that's
right.
The warmth just runs through you, like, okay, here we go. And I remember when he came through, I was on the other side of the room, and it was a kind of a long room. And I said, should I move closer so I can hear? And he's like, don't worry, you'll be able to hear her, because this woman just came blaring out of this guy. And of course, I'm sitting there going, this is a carnival trick. And I'm waiting for him to break character. But this woman is coming out of this man's body. It was the craziest thing. And I'm just waiting and waiting for him to mess up. Again, I'm a left brain guy. I really am. So it's like I wanted to debunk it. And this was back in my academy days. So I remember at the very end, it went very well. I felt very at ease. It seemed like a normal thing 10 minutes in, which is just crazy to say, but it was. But I remember at the very end, again, them knowing I needed confirmation. She referenced a dream I had the night before that I had not shared with anybody. And which just told me they were in my subconscious, they were in my head, and it was a little unsettling, actually. I'm like, what else do you know? Apparently everything. So we'll just roll with that. But it made it real, and that was another turning point for me, for sure.
Has anybody ever shared with you on the police force of finding missing persons or anything like that through mediums or psychics?
I didn't talk to them about missing persons in particular, but I did ask a few of them because I said, okay, this traumatic experience happened to you. Thank you for sharing it with me. Have you talked to anybody? Because I did, there's another part to this. They need to heal, right? Mm-hmm. And some of them were like, no, I'm good. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I'm like, okay, good. But some of them were like, yeah, I had no one to talk to. It really messed me up. Again, if there was some of them had small children involved that were hurt or even worse. And that was something that I can't even imagine witnessing and having to, go through. But, there is counseling available, once they go through those things, and they have people that they can talk to. But I said, do you go to psychics for not just to, help solve cases, but to, heal yourself and get some insight? And to the second part, they said no. They didn't think to go to a psychic or anybody like that to kind of help them reconcile what had happened. But it's not really, from what I was told, and again, it was just a few people that I talked to, but using psychics for missing persons and like that is the exception, not the norm. Apparently, it's on TV. They do it all the time.
Right.
They know how to do their job. They're I think the impression I got, and again, I may be wrong, but the impression I got from them was that would happen at the request of the family that is affected, because they just want to. They're at this point, they just want something.
Right.
But I don't think that's something the police would say, no, we have our ways of doing things. And even if it becomes a cold case or it goes on for some time, things still resurface. They solve cases years later. And the problem with someone saying, okay, I went to a psychic and they said we should check A, B, and C, it can take you completely off where you were going. And you could lose traction. You could lose time.
Right.
And what if you were 2 steps away from getting where you wanted to be with that case? So that was the response to me, was it can be very dangerous to do that. But I didn't get the feeling from the responses that it was something that happened very often.
Got it. So what are some of the other stories that you write about?
So there was a young EMT, and they got a call that a woman had died in her apartment. And so they showed up to the apartment, and the door was slightly ajar. And so he pushed it open, and standing to the left was a woman, and she had a yellow robe and brown hair, and she just pointed to the stairs to his right. And so he's like, okay, he took her cue. They ran upstairs. And he said he got upstairs and he turned the corner, and there was that woman in the yellow robe with the brown hair dead on the ground. And he tried to revive her. He couldn't. And he went back downstairs. There was no one there. Apparently the woman lived alone. And not to sound like a cheesy movie, but the call had come from in the house. It was a woman voice. So he never, it was one of those situations where you hear about a ghost kind of helping themselves or helping someone that passed. And
Mm-hmm.
I got several stories related to me where they would show up to an accident on the road, and somebody would say this way, and they'd follow a man or a woman, and they'd get to the car only to see that it was the man and woman in the car that was hurt that had taken them to that car, and they turn and they'd be gone. So it was their ghosts, or their soul coming to get them. I did hear that quite a bit as well.
Kind of like an out-of-body experience.
Yeah. And those are crazy. And speaking of that, have you had experiences with astral projection?
Yes, I have. Have you, okay, you know about the Robert Monroe Institute, right?
Yep, sure do.
He's got they have a 7 cassette series where it's a training for meditation to do out-of-body experiences and to do astral projections and things like that. And it was started by it wasn't started by the government, but the government was using, it's called the Gateway Program. And Robert Monroe actually teamed up with the government, and they were training FBI agents, Coast Guard agents. And the idea was to try to figure out, at first, they were trying to train their people how to figure out which boats were carrying contraband into the country from basically moving between Key West and I think it was Cuba. There was like a bunch of fishing boats coming back and forth between there, and they were trying to figure out, they wanted to pinpoint which boats were carrying drugs and things like that. And then it progressed into more and more of a bigger program to where they were doing different intelligence training and things like that. But at any rate, it's a 7 cassette series. You can find it on the Monroe Institute website. I did that, and I tell you what, you want to be opened up. I've done the whole series twice. It really trains you to be able to open up and to do astral projection and remote viewing and things like that. It's the coolest thing. And I think you mentioned that you read the books, right?
Yeah, I read, so back, when I was going to the academy 2 or 3 times a week, I devoured every book. And, I think Journeys Out of the Body was his first one. And then it was Far Journeys was the second one. And then The Ultimate Journey, I think might have been the third one, or maybe The Final Journey. But he had a trilogy, about journeys. Mm-hmm. And he wrote very candidly about his out-of-body experiences. And it's funny you say it was 9 cassettes. It was back in the day. It was cassettes for sure. And I do remember having those cassettes. So kids that are listening, those were CDs. Something we had. It was before the CD, guys. Some may never know what that is. Oh, wow, I'm really dating myself. But yeah, I remember it was just, again, I took it very seriously. My understanding was, you'll be able to align yourself better without drinking carbonated beverages and, mm-hmm. That sort of thing. And so I really made a point of just being super healthy and aligning myself. And I couldn't wait every night to lay down and go into that trance and have those experiences. So were you able to consciously get out and have control and all that?
Yeah, it's really helped me in my own life with things like depression, with artistic stuff, you name it. It's just an amazing program to learn, because basically what it's doing is you're able to shut down your brain. And they use HemiSync. I forgot to add that in there. It's a HemiSync program. And so both of your whole brain works together to get past your left brain thinking, like you mentioned earlier. And you're able to kind of connect with spirit and be able to receive messages. It's just the neatest thing. I really can't describe it a whole lot. It's hard to put into words.
It is. And you almost, when it's happening, it's sort of, you're not sure what to make of it. But then once it's done, then you're like, it's different than a dream because you have full memory. It's not like a dream where it's starting to fade the second you come out of it. Mm-hmm. It's like it's still there. It's right there. I had an interesting when I was able to get out one evening. I say get out. Just got out of my body, no big deal. But I was able to lift out. And as soon as I did, I was like a baby deer, trying to stand. I was like, I didn't have any control or anything. And it was really weird. And everything was foggy, but I could see the door, but it was like foggy and my spirit guide, or what I thought she would look like, came out of the bedroom or the closet door, and she was like, they shouldn't be here. And she pointed all the way into the corner and of course I could see through the wall, but into the corner of the living room. And I was, just staying with someone at the time, renting a room. And I said, okay. And I didn't think anything of it. And then I think a couple of days later, my friend Dane came over, and he was like, whoa, you got something really bad in that back corner over there. There's some negative. And I was like, whoa. And I completely forgot, to share that with him. And so, it's just, again, they like to hide in corners, and there's negativity that builds, kind of thing. And so it was a great cleanse your house 101 moment that we had with the white candles and the sage and all that good stuff. Holy water, sea salt, no big. What everybody does on a Thursday, right?
Right, exactly. Speaking of that kind of stuff, one of the main characters in your book, doesn't he come in contact with a possession case?
Yeah, so this is something that came from the street I grew up on. Again, some of the things were things that happened when I was a kid, and it's funny when I look back now, I'm like, oh my gosh, that happened. And kids are sponges. I mean, I was young, but I heard everything that was being said. I heard everything that the responders were saying, everything the parents were saying. And of course, I lived in this little cul-de-sac, so the whole neighborhood was always together. They were always doing parties and block parties and things like that. So if something happened, they all congregated, and I just had to stand there and listen. And, there was something, so anyway, there was a neighbor who had moved. There was one house where, it seemed like every 6 months to a year, there was a new family there. They weren't renting, they would buy it, but then they'd sell it real quick. And at the time, I didn't really understand why, but good things never happened in that house with those families. And there was one family where the mother would be seen late at night chasing her kids down the street with a knife, a big kitchen knife. And she had, a couple daughters and she had an autistic son. And it was just terrifying. Everybody's like, we reported her, or the parents reported her. And then you see the police were there, constantly. And so there was one day, it was the little boy's birthday, and, the outside was decorated, and so balloons on the mailbox, that sort of thing, to see, show where the party was. And he had gotten a parakeet for his birthday. And the mother was having a particularly bad day. Apparently there was a lot of mental health issues. That's what they thought anyway, but she would hear voices out of the vents in the ceilings. And so when you went in the house, all the vents were taped shut. And the father explained that he had to move her from room to room to get her away from the voices in the vents, because they would tell her to do bad things. And it was just, so I got to the point where I wasn't allowed to go to that house anymore. But unfortunately, there was one night where the little boy came out into the yard. He was crying, and he's holding the parakeet that he got for his birthday, and it had a knife just paled through it. And you think back then, it's like, that's nothing you forget, kind of thing, and it's just super scary. And they left. But so I incorporated that story into what had happened to poor detective. I gave him even more. I'm so sorry. I gave him something else to go through.
Wow.
Yeah. And there was we also lived before they built condos. There was wooded area behind the house, and of course, back in the day, in the summer, we just wandered aimlessly around the city and came back home at dinner time and hoped that we were okay when we got back. And we would go back in that wooded area and just run around. But there was an abandoned kind of like small barn, I guess. And at the time, I didn't know what a pentagram was, but I do now. But there was a giant pentagram. And there was always like, candles that were, melted over, and, paraphernalia that now makes sense of things that were being done there. And so one day I'm hearing the parents talk, and there was a cut-in from our house to the back. And so they were using that cut-in. I said, what's going on? And they had found, hate saying this because I'm a dog person, but there was a dog that had been sacrificed, and he'd put in the ground upside down. So it was just his back end sticking out. Yeah, it was. And of course, hearing that as a child, hearing as an adult, it bothers me. But it had been sacrificed in what they assumed was some sort of satanic ritual that had been done, and that stuck with me for sure. The pentagram and all that, and so unfortunately, Detective Burke has to deal with that in Ghost Crimes too. Again, I'm so sorry to give you even more to deal with, Detective.
What's interesting though is the detective goes through this entire healing process, does he not?
He's starting to turn a corner. So I paired him up with a young. So he's paired up originally with a very young police officer who is, go-getter, young in shape, kind of the opposite of Detective Burke, follows the rules kind of thing. But he's a super good guy. He's one of those guys that, he's always looking out for everybody else. And by the end of the book, he's helping Burke turn a corner with his health. But he starts to experience some of the things Burke experienced. At first, he doesn't believe it, and then he starts to have his own experiences. And then I have a third player that comes into it again, suffers from traumatic loss because of the paranormal. So in book 2, I sort of put the 3 together. And so I had a lot of fun in book 2 with their dynamic. So Burke has turned around. He's dropped a ton of weight. He's starting to get a square jaw. He's hitting the gym, but he's socially awkward. He hasn't been in the world for so long. He doesn't know how to act. He's very direct. So he doesn't know how to temper things with humor, and he doesn't really care to. He's like, I'll answer your question, but here's the answer. So, there's not a lot of warmth, but he doesn't mean to be he thinks he's helping. So he's really kind of learning how to be in society again after his initial, loss when he was very young and in college or just out of college. So, so he's in the process, but it's going to take a few books, I think, to get him where he needs to be.
Was it you that told me a coma story? I can't remember which guest it was.
Yes. Oh my gosh, this one's crazy. So there's a woman and a man call, and they say someone's broke into our house and he's threatening us. There's a man in our house threatening us. So the police show up, and this officer, I named her Valerie. Because she was just no nonsense, really tough, but very caring. You can tell that, their heart was just crushed, in this situation. And I worked with a Valerie who reminded me of her. So I kind of paid homage to my friend Valerie in that respect. So Officer Valerie shows up, and there's a man in their living room, and he's very upset and he's shouting, and they're just sort of like trying to keep him calm. And he's got a hospital gown on. And he keeps saying the same thing over. He says, she killed me. She's the one that killed me. And he keeps pointing at her. And the cop's like, okay, let's get you out of here. And he doesn't resist. She takes him outside, puts him in the car. She goes back in and says, hey, what's the deal? They're like, I don't know. This is weird. He just walked into our home. And so she goes back out, and he's gone. He's not in the car. The doors have not been opened. He's gone. So she's like, okay, something's up. So she goes to the nearest hospital thinking, okay, let's see what's up. And so she starts explaining it to the nurses and everybody that's working. And they're like, what did he look like? And she explained, what he looked like. And they're like, that sounds like this patient who had been in the hospital for months in a coma, who had died earlier that morning. So she's like, okay, so she's got a name. So she's like, she said her spidey senses went off. So she went back to the couple at the break-in and said, hey, do you know this person? And the girl's face just said it all. She did. And she's like, okay, what happened? And the girl breaks down in tears and goes into full confession mode. And apparently several months prior, she had been dating this man, and his car was in the shop. So she had to pick him up for the date night, and she had been drinking. So she picks him up, he gets in the car, and he had begged her, hey, let me drive, because you've been drinking. She's like, I'm fine. Well, they end up running into a big tree. He's knocked out and will be in a coma for the next couple months. And before she called for help, she put him in the driver's seat and kind of blamed him. So that was what he meant, was she killed me. And it took time, but he finally died, in the coma. And it was interesting. It's like, okay, she told me a paranormal story that had happened to her, but what was so amazing about Valerie was she said, I'm so happy that happened, because now the man's family, who thought he had been driving drunk and had, made a poor decision and all that never happened. He was a victim. They got some closure. They got to understand what really happened. And this person, who was probably carrying guilt for lying, was able to turn a corner and now start to heal from the poor decisions they made. And I was like, wow, you forget that, because these first responders have to be tough and stoic and factual, and they're trained that way. And of course they have to be thick skinned for the horrible things they've seen and endure. But they're still amazing people beneath that uniform, right? And beneath that badge. And it just reminded me of that. And so it's so important. And I say this all the time. It's like these folks, the police and firefighters, our military, they go out every day and put their lives on the line for strangers. And it's like, how can we not appreciate that? At the very least, show appreciation for what they do. And my way of doing that is I wrote a book called Haunted Tampa. And it just kind of tells you about the haunted places in Tampa, the history behind it, what people have experienced. And I knew it would be just a locally sold book, but I wanted to give back. And so all the proceeds go to the Wounded Warriors Project to support the folks in the military. And my thought was, I may not be making a huge difference, but I'm giving back. But if an author in every city did it for their city and gave money, how much could we give to those folks, right?
Right.
And for a little while, I actually gave back to the K-9 unit in the police department here in Tampa as well. And I really liked that idea, but then I was excluding the county sheriff. And so I got kind of in a weird situation where I was like, oh, I don't want to show favoritism to the sheriff. So I ended up saying, okay, let me just do our military and support them.
Well, that's a great cause.
Yeah.
So in one of your books, or the one that you're writing about haunted Florida, you mentioned Sulphur Springs Tower, right?
Yes. So Sulphur Springs is interesting tower. So it was early 1920s. It was built, and it was adjacent to a beautiful hotel. And the allure was that there were the calming, waters and the salty bath waters of the spring, and and that's, everybody would go there, and it was very high end. It had the first mall in Florida attached to it, so it's very much a destination resort for people with money at the time. They really focused, hey, it's a 5-star, resort. So unfortunately, the Great Depression came, and the economic strife at the time, just, nobody could travel anymore. And there were people that climbed to the top of that tower and threw themselves off because they had lost everything. There was
10 people. Is it more than that?
I don't know how many were documented because they were suicides, but I think there were 47 when I researched it, but they kind of didn't want to take away from the tourism of Florida, so they kind of downplayed a lot of that at one point as well. But the tower ended up being shut down, became a landmark. It degraded, and then City of Tampa bought it back, and so now it's protected. But it hasn't been really restored. They have lights on it, and it's really neat. If you look at the cover of Haunted Tampa, that's what that is, that tower. But you can see it when you're driving on our Interstate 275 here in Tampa. You can see it just brightly lit, it's almost like stadium lights. It's like right there. And a lot of people that are traveling, and I've heard a lot of truck drivers say it too, that they can still see people dropping off.
People say that about the San Francisco Bridge too.
Yeah.
You hear a lot of those stories. Do you think these places have some sort of vortex around them, like an energy field that draws that kind of energy and draws people to it?
I don't, that's a good question, because the state of mind you have to be in to perform, to do that, because that's an act on your own. That is something you're deciding to do. And you're just be completely in a very, very dark, deep place. So to say that there was dark energy there that would feed that and give you that last step to make it happen, that would make sense. Because I think a lot of people might go there and go, wait a minute, it isn't that bad. Hang on a second, I'm overreacting kind of thing. So to your point, that may be something that happens. And, and if you do die traumatically, you don't want to accept that you did it, and then, are you repeating it? Or is it a recorded loop? Then those theories of what people are seeing. But that's got to be dark. That's got to be dark and heavy for sure.
It's an interesting concept, because it's a common thing with the San Francisco Bridge, and I think there's woods too. I think in Japan that is a common suicidal place, and people they claim they see people all the time there. So it makes you wonder about that.
Yeah, I mean, if you take the state of mind that you're in when you decide to kill yourself out of being in a very, very difficult place where there's no resolution, and you take that with you, then, are you affecting people from the other side now? It it would make sense. And, it's so funny. We're all trying to figure out what happens on the other side, and we'll find out. We just won't be able to come back and tell anyone.
And that's the thing about the paranormal field. I feel like it only lets you see so much. It seems like there's like some kind of law where you can't get past a certain threshold.
Yeah. And I think that's by design. I mean, we're physical. This is 3D reality. The astral plane, or whatever you want to call the next dimension over or up or wherever, isn't physical. And we dream, and the dreams aren't physical. And we bring them back, and they're distorted and crazy, and we can half remember them. It's like, so we can't even figure out a dream. How are we going to figure out being in another dimension? I mean, come on. I don't think we're ready for that next level of growth yet. I don't think so, not yet.
So you have had a lot of personal experiences, and it seems like in the paranormal field right now, everything's in different silos. Like you have the Bigfoot people over here, you got the ghost hunters in this area, you got the alien people here. How does everything connect?
I wonder about that too, because I belong to a lot of these groups, and friends with a lot of people on Facebook and Instagram and all that. And those Bigfoot people are funny. They're like, they're really into Bigfoot, and I find it funny because I'm like, I'm into Bigfoot too. I think it's very interesting, and I have my theories on Bigfoot. But I'm like, just Bigfoot? I'm like, okay, but everybody's got their thing, rock on. Aliens, everybody's got their focus, and mine was reincarnation. So that's my big thing, past lives. I mean, that's what grabbed me, and that to this day, kind of keeps me going. But it's interesting because I talk about metaphysical a lot, because for my definition, for the definitions of the word, so metaphysical is. Meta means above, beyond, transcending the physical, right? And then paranormal is defined as anything that can't be defined by science. Mm-hmm. So the paranormal is sort of under the metaphysical umbrella, in my opinion. But when you say paranormal, it's sort of become synonymous with ghosts now, right? That means it's a paranormal show. They're hunting ghosts. Yeah. So if I say, hey, I want to talk about the paranormal, which is past life regression, they're like, that's not paranormal. It is. Because it can't be defined by science yet, right? But again, to answer your question, the Bigfoot, the alien, all those things are under that metaphysical umbrella, of which I cannot get enough. But so what I look for is why is everybody focused? Why are these people focused on Bigfoot or aliens, and why am I focused on past life so much? And I think it's what we get back from it. And so for me, with the past life, it's like I started to understand things about myself, and at least that's how I defined my experiences. So I think with the Bigfoot, I need to ask somebody that question, is like, what are they getting back from that? But again, it's an otherworldly thing. If there's something outside of the physical, it really helps you redefine what the physical is for you. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it really matters what it is of those things. It's just something outside of it. And I had that moment when I realized there was something outside of physical reality, because I was in retail management for years back in the day. And there's nothing more mundane than retail management. And so I was like, oh my God, is this all there is? Am I just going to eat dinner, go to work, come back, hit the gym or whatever, this is my life kind of thing. I was like, there's got to be more than this. And when you find more out there, then it's a lot of fun. And, and I think for some it might be a hobby too, just to kind of see. But there was a great meme today because it said people were out there trying to do like mating calls for Bigfoot. And they said, what if he comes? What's your plan then? You need to think about step 2.
The recent ghost hunt that I did, we were on a paranormal case. One of the guys, he's the leader of our group. We were out in the middle of this almond orchard out in this little town. There's nobody that lives there. And probably about 15 miles, you can hear everything because there's nothing there, right? There's nothing but fields of trees, basically. And we heard just a little bit of Mexican music. So we knew there was like a party going on somewhere in the vicinity. And for some reason, we're out there, we're seeing like shadows and, lights and everything else. And at the end of our investigating the field, my friend decides he's going to try to call Bigfoot. And he starts like calling, and it's echoing through the hills. And I thought, oh my God, now we're going to have a bunch of Mexicans come beating us up in the middle of the fields trying to find out who this is. It was crazy.
Yeah. My thought on Bigfoot is because for something to elude us, with all of our, the hunters out there and all of our equipment and all those things, it's like they truly have to disappear. So I'm going to guess that they come into this. They're probably slightly out of phase in another dimension. They come into here. They do what, maybe it's the food they need. I don't know. They come here for whatever they come for, and then they go back out, kind of thing.
So I interviewed several different Native Americans on that topic, and they believe that it's a spirit from a different dimension from their world. It's an interesting theory. So I just have to add this in before we wrap up because we're out of time. We're at the bottom of the hour already. I have a golden retriever who is a rescue that I love, and I know that you do a lot of work with rescuing dogs. And can you talk about that real quick?
Yeah, so I was in the pet industry for many years. I was a regional manager for a large pet chain, specialty chain, and my job was to oversee the grooming, dog training, services side of the business, photography, that sort of thing. And the dog training side was such a passion for me because the majority of the dogs that are put into shelters or given up are because of behavioral issues. They weren't able to be potty trained or things like that. And so we worked really hard to have programs where our dog trainers would go to the shelters and train the dogs so that they were trying to get more easily adoptable. And it just really, yeah. So I had an adoption group that I worked with that I supported for many years, and I would watch them adopt, 15 to 20 dogs a week from outside of one of the stores. And what was interesting about them was that they didn't get the perfectly adoptable dogs. They left those because somebody's going to adopt those. They went after the dogs that were older, that were maybe missing half the ear because they had an accident, or they weren't the perfect dog. They weren't easily adoptable. Those were the ones they grabbed. And I was like, wow. So I had 2 rescue dogs back in the day, and this is my first generation of dogs. And I adopted a dog from them that was the 3rd dog, and he was a special needs dog. and my life turned upside down because literally 2 perfect dogs for 3 years. When I got that 3rd dog, it became a pack. And everything changed. And I wrote a book called Two's Company, Three's a Pack. And it basically says what happened with those animals, but how amazing my life was having had those animals. And I had 2 of them for 14 and a half years, 1 for 11 and a half. And now I'm on my 2nd generation of rescue dogs. They're turning 8 now. But I kind of got them when the senior from the last group was going to pass. I said, if I don't do this now, but I should have gotten more. Anyway, I got 2, but the next batch I'll get at least 4 next time. But anyway, I compiled a book for that rescue group called The Dogs of Lost Angels and donated all the proceeds to them and gave that back to them as my way of supporting them. But yeah, it's all about the pups. They run this house. I just...
I've got one rescue. She came from the Middle Tennessee Golden Rescue Society, and she had a pretty bad. I got her at 8 months, and it took a lot of time to kind of get her to heal. I guess she was very emancipated and the whole deal. Never walked on grass before, so I had to train her how, not to be afraid of grass. And by the time I got her, she had this big open space to run around. It's cool. She's really good now. She's 10.
My first dog was a retriever. He was a retriever. He looked just like a black lab, but he was actually lab and Roddy. And when he got older, he kind of got that Roddy build, so he was more Roddy looking, but his face was a lab. But the retrievers are just the most loving, amazing, smart animals. Mm-hmm. But I was lucky to get him at. It's funny, I tell the story in the book, but I literally had changed jobs and I no longer had to travel for work. I was going to be local. And I literally got up that Saturday and I said, get a dog. Went down to the shelter. And, I didn't have much experience at that point, but I went up to the counter and I said, I want to get a black lab puppy. And the lady kind of looks at me like I'm ordering at the drive-thru. I'm like, I want a black lab puppy, please. And she's like, they just dropped a litter of 8 off this morning. And I go, great. And I literally walk down, I open the cage door. One of them walks out. I go, well, I guess that's my guy. And 2 days later, I picked him up. And it was meant to be. But he discovered the swimming pool early on. And that's some of my favorite memories is just sitting in the pool and throwing that toy and having him just circle that pool.
That's great. So before we go, what are some of the upcoming events and projects you have coming up?
So I'm working on Ghost Crimes 3. The title is The Unholy Trinity. So I'm going to continue on with the 3 main characters and continue to add those paranormal first responder and healthcare worker experiences in there. I'm also writing the first Ghost Crimes book into a screenplay. I hope that it would be like maybe a 6 to 8 show series on a station. So that's taking a lot of my time as well. I did cancel my Paracon engagements just because of the craziness with the travel and everything that's going on out there. So unfortunately right now I don't have any scheduled dates out there. So I'm focused more on safe podcasts like we're doing today.
Yeah.
So, but we'll see. I have a trip planned at the end of September. We'll see how that goes. But in talking to folks that work at the airlines, I'm hearing things are really calming down and people aren't as crazy to get out there. Everybody had to get through that. We've been cooped up and we need to get out there. And so they were crazy. And so now it's starting to level out. But, I just want to stay safe out there. So I'm just kind of being cautious.
All right.
But if anybody wants to check out my books, they can go to my website, gareallen.com. And then all of my books are available in Kindle, paperback, and Audible at amazon.com and audible.com.
Well, Garrett, thank you for being a part of this show. I really appreciate it. And I really enjoyed having you on.
Thank you so much for having me. Like I said, I think you and I were cut from the same cloth. You're in Vegas and I've been there 6 times. So I have to ask you real quick, do you live in near the Strip in Las Vegas?
I do. So everybody practically lives near the Strip because the Strip is in the center of everything and everything's just outside. It's not really a big city. It's very small.
Oh, okay.
So I live probably about 5 minutes from Las Vegas Strip, and I'm right on the border of Henderson and what they would call, I forget the name of what they call it, but it's a little area called Southern Highlands. So there's a ring of mountains that go all around Vegas, and I'm like smack against the southern end of it. So my backyard is like all hills. It's really cool.
I couldn't live there. I couldn't. There's no way. I go there and it's 3 days of debauchery, and then I go back to Tampa, Florida, where I can be a normal person again. But it's like, I don't understand. You must be a very disciplined, good person. So good for you.
Well, I tell you what happens. You kind of, when you live here, it gets old. It's like living in any tourist town. You just never, like you live near the beach, you don't go to the beach really. I lived in Nashville. I never went to 2nd Avenue or Broadway to do the party honky tonk thing unless I had people in town. I never just went out and did it. We always had our local areas. And so here in Vegas, we all have our local casinos, and they're really not, you can gamble there, yeah, but it's not like what you see on a Strip. It's more about eating. It's nice restaurants and things like that.
Well, that's what I got grabbed by was, going to Hell's Kitchen and, Ramsay Burger and, just the things I can't do here in Tampa. But you're right. I don't go to Disney. I'm never at Disney.
Yeah. Disney's one of those places I just never really had to drive to go ever. I've never been to Disney.
Yeah, I did early on. We would get the Florida residence pass back in the day and, be there quite a bit. And it was a lot of fun, roller coasters. But at some point, I don't know. I can't do roller coasters anymore. I get motion sickness. I got old at some point, and it's like, okay, I don't do that anymore. So
the other thing about Vegas too is there's so much around it. We've got Area 51. We got all of the Native American stuff. We have ghost towns everywhere. It's just so fascinating. I spend more of my time out in the middle of the desert than I do here in the city.
Nice. Right on. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much again for having me on. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask you back once you get your other book out.
All right. Awesome. Definitely.